This is a set of shelves between the two main bedrooms at the very top of the house. They're definitely not something I'd want on display, so I thought I'd take them down and put them into the storage room just around the corner. As you can see, they're really well built, with mortise and tenon joints. Probably the sturdiest set of homemade shelves I've ever seen. Now, I don't know much about carpentry, so I thought this could be a really good first project. Learn a few things taking them down, and then hopefully set them up accurately in the storage room. To be honest with you, they were pretty simple. Cleaning them took the most time. There are cobwebs and spiders all around this house, and I was determined to try not to make a mess. Once I got everything clean, they came down super quick, and I was able to get them in the next room. That, however, was a little bit harder to put back together just because I hadn't labeled the slats as well as I should have. But hopefully I've learned a lesson for next time. After I had them down, I pulled our IKEA wardrobes into the corridor. I wish I only did one at a time now because they took up a lot of space in a really small area. They were pretty tricky to get up here. The biggest one was 82 pounds or over 30 kilograms, and I'm recovering from a shoulder operation 2 months ago, so it was pretty tricky. As you can see, I consulted the instructions quite carefully throughout. I really didn't want to make a mistake. These are something we'd like to have here for a very long time. We'll eventually fit out the surrounds of them once we will pull up the carpet and pull down the wallpaper and just redecorate. But for now, we'll leave the outside exposed. Now, at this point, I was going to flip it over to try to put the backboard on, but unfortunately there just wasn't enough room in this corridor, so I had to drag them into the bedroom and do it there. So far, this is definitely a one-person job, but this is where I wish I had someone else. Trying to support the backboard while nailing it in at the same time was really tricky. In the end, I balanced it on my knees and tried to pin it in as I went. I then very quickly realized that I had done it backwards and had to undo it all. This was really frustrating because I ripped up the edging of the backboard as I went through. There's really no other way to do it. After that, I was really careful putting the nails back in because I didn't want to damage any more of the board. This took quite a long time. There are 47 nails in total. But this is when I realized I made my second mistake. After securing it all, I dragged it back out into the corridor and realized I couldn't stand it up. There is a section of the instructions that I didn't quite understand just because the instructions are all done by drawings, but it essentially says, if your ceiling is lower than 244 centimeters, you have to build it standing up, otherwise it just won't fit. Our ceiling is 242. I was convinced I could drag it down the stairs and then prop it up vertically on each step and pull it up as I went, but unfortunately the angle of the ceiling limited me. I was beyond stressed at this point. The only option was to take it all apart again and start from scratch. And this meant taking off the backboard yet again. The edges of it were absolutely frayed by the end. I was really worried it was going to look horrible when I finished it, but I did what I had to do. Again, this was also unbelievably tricky just because of the weight of it. This is the one that's 82 pounds. So having to lift it up the stairs was so challenging. But I got it upright back in the corridor, took all the nails out one by one. This took an immense amount of time. I was able to save most of them. I only bent 2 of them, which means I was able to pin 45 back in place once I got the rest of the cupboard stood up. I think building it in place, you should probably have 2 people. This was definitely much more challenging than it needed to be just because I was trying to hold things up with one arm and nail with the other. Keeping in mind that the hand I was nailing with wasn't particularly useful just because my shoulder is very weak at the minute. And again, this took a huge amount of time. I was super careful putting these pins back in. I didn't want to have to take them out again. And I definitely didn't want them coming through the other side. I also had to clean as I went, just because, unfortunately, as I pulled this all down, the edges of the backboard all frayed and fell on the floor. This whole process for this one cupboard took about 3 hours. After that, I built the 2 smaller units in probably less than a half hour each. There's definitely an act to it, and once you get through one, it is really easy. I would just recommend double checking the height of your ceilings. I didn't film the other 2 wardrobes being set up just because I was beyond frustrated, but actually I did it before I went to bed and it turned out pretty nice. 2 days later, the doors came. I thought this was going to be super simple as well, and to be fair, putting the hardware and hinges on actually was quite simple. What I wasn't quite expecting was having to drill the holes for the handles. This just made me a bit nervous because having to drill holes on something that is going to be visible forever was something I'd not really done before. Any kind of handiwork I've decided to do has been something you can hide. So I definitely just did my calculations really carefully. I measured the distance between that horizontal board in the middle, took away the distance between the nail holes in the 2 handle, and then divided by 2. That's the distance I measured down from that middle board and then up from the bottom of the edge of that middle board. That made sure the handle was centered. I then just guessed that 3 centimeters from the edge was a good distance. There are no instructions on that, I think because all the handles are ever so slightly different. But actually, I think it worked out all right, and my calculations ended up being pretty accurate. My husband had to come and help here. Definitely a 2-man job to get these doors installed. One person has to hold them upright, and the other has to screw in the hardware. I set these doors on 2 upside-down bins just to get them off the ground. It did the trick, didn't scuff the doors in any way, which I was a little worried about because they're metal, but actually it did the job for this. I think having a workbench would be something I'd really like one day. I do really like them. I was worried they might look a bit cheap being an IKEA wardrobe, but actually these have a 10-year warranty and one of their high-end models. I really hope they do stand the test of time because I think they look really smart. Thanks for watching.